Hey, hi, aloha. Hi, I'm Ghosty, and welcome back to the channel and my videos, and just watching me and hearing me out. Today we'll be taking a look at episode 5 of Moon Knight. So of course, spoilers for episode 5 for Moon Knight. And of course, like I did any other Moon Knight video I put up so far, I'm going to go watch the episode, and I'll get back to you. A lot of crazy stuff has been going on, and I'm really eager to see what else is next and what happens after what we saw in episode 4. So, episode 5, here we go. I'm not sure whether to smile and enjoy or cry in despair. For one thing I can say for sure, Moon Knight, in my opinion, has come all this way so far, and they have yet to disappoint. This episode was insane. A lot of shit happened. A lot of stuff goes on in this episode, and a lot of stuff went down. I have no idea where to start first. Convenient, considering how they are in his mind. Or even if it is his mind, let's talk about it. Well, the first thing I want to bring up is a TikTok that I saw. I know it had nothing to do with the episode, but it does have something to do with Moon Knight. A friend sent me it about a theory about how all of the stuff taking place in Moon Knight is actually a show inside of the TV show. It's its own TV show in the MCU. Like it's a show that's existing inside this universe that we're watching. If you're on TikTok at all, you've probably seen it. It's two guys that sit at a desk and talk about theories about comics and video games and whatnot nonstop. At least that's what comes up on my For You page. However, this theory is supported by a lot of stuff in the show. A lot of evidence that could support this theory. Like green screens, cameras in the backgrounds of shots here and there, some stuff, and of course not everything making sense. But I really do hope it's not that way. By the looks of things in this episode, we're still in Mark's mind and Steven's, I guess, for all of it. And some of it could be real, which is what I'm going to get into. But, of course, we know all the MCU shows, or everything in the MCU connects, and they all come together at some point. But this looks like it could be the one thing that doesn't. As much as I want to see Moon Knight collide screens with Spider-Man and other heroes, it might not happen. But you never know. And I only say this because so far it has no references, and so far it's all in its own continuity. There's nothing outside of Moon Knight in this show. It's strictly on Moon Knight and Mark Spector and Khonshu, all about this one specific character and his story. And is it a good direction for the show? I think so. I think the show's doing great so far, and I'm loving it. And like I said, this episode is included with that. It did not disappoint. And that being said, that would be the reason, or my example, of how it might not connect to the MCU. If it is a show, which I really hope it's not, because I'm not a big fan of when things, like, at the end of it, things are all fake, and, like, not a simulation, but kind of like simulation, that's an example. But, like, if it's none of this actually happened, it depends how they execute it. If they make it, it could be interesting. The way they execute it is is what my opinion really relies on. But that's what I mean. Regardless of what they do, if they do decide to make the twist of how it's all not actually in the real world in this universe, and it's actually a TV show, or it's all in Mark's head, or something along those lines, like the show kind of seems like it makes it out to be from this episode, which them scenes are amazing, by the way. The scenes with Mark in the asylum talking to Harrow, while Harrow's the doctor, them scenes are so good. But besides just praising them scenes, that's what I'm talking about. If they do make it out to be not in the real world and it's fake all this time, and the Moon Knight and the Khonshu scenarios didn't actually happen, it could just lead to the end of the series and wrapping up Moon Knight and his character and the show. That would mean that it won't connect to the rest of the MCU. Unless they do want to connect it to the rest of the MCU, which they obviously, well, not obviously, but I think they would do that. Again, it's the MCU. That's what they've been doing for a while. I don't see why they wouldn't do that. So I don't think it's going to be all fake. If they did do it in the direction of where it's fake on Mark's head, and he's reliving things in his mind, I wouldn't mind it because actually that's interesting, and I actually do like that concept. But the TV show concept I didn't like that much, and just everything like being fake. Besides just being in like Mark's like broken mind and all of his like fractured pieces of his head. That idea is cool. I do like that a lot, and it's complex. TV show thing, not so much. But like I said already, it is the MCU we're talking about, so I don't think that they're gonna go down that road of making it all in his head or anything like that. And I think this is happening in the real world, and it is coming to fruition. We just have to, like the last episode, last video, episodes video, episode 4 video that I was talking about. I mentioned this mental hospital as a puzzle piece with different puzzle pieces, or no, as a whole puzzle with different puzzle pieces all connecting. Let's take that, and this whole puzzle, we have different pieces, and that is all the different places that we see. The first being the real world, which I do think is like this is all actually happening. Not this episode, because I think this is in his mind, but the Moon Knight stuff with Harrow trying to revive Amit, I think that is in the real world. So we have that. We have the mental hospital, which is the broken pieces of Mark's mind trying to fit into play and coming together. And it's chaos. It's a mess. Which is the mental hospital, and that is where they meet Tawaret. She's the Moto. She's the hippopotamus god. Then we have the actual more grounded mental hospital, or the Asylum, the office that Mark talks to Harrow in. Plus Steven, towards the end of the episode when they do get Steven to come out and talk to Harrow. So let's try to fit these pieces together. We have the real world, where Mark was a mercenary, revived by Khonshu, and he created these different personalities to deal with trauma, as we see. What happened with his mother, and what happened in his childhood. He created Stephen Grant as an escape, a route to get away from the negative emotions that he goes, and the trauma. That is the real world. With Layla, and he did actually get shot. I'm pretty sure that was real. And then we have mental hospital, where Mark is literally talking to Steven, and they're two different bodies of one another, and that is where we see them going around trying to find the different memories in this episode, and that's where they meet Tawaret, the hippo god. And this is, like I've mentioned before, all these broken fragments of Mark's mind, all roaming about, trying to come together. As well as the afterlife, because we do see the doors open and they meet Tawaret, and they go through the desert on that boat, or the Duat, I think it's called, that they said, and where they find the balance scale. Which, before I get into the next thing, I want to talk about the balance scale. At first, I thought, and I'm going to touch on this while I'm talking about this now, before I forget. I thought they had 2 hearts on the scale. I thought they were missing a piece, like an important puzzle piece. I thought they needed one more thing. I thought they were going to complete the picture, like complete the puzzle, with one more piece, and I thought that was going to be the heart of Jake Lockley, or this third personality that they haven't yet shown us. They didn't even show it in this. They did, but somewhat, I think they hinted at it. I don't know, but they didn't show them. They didn't come up, unless they did, because there was a memory that neither Mark nor Steven remembers, but we see Mark switch to Steven when we actually see the memory take place. So I'm not sure how that works out, but still, no Jake. And then comes the last piece, like I said before, the 3 settings in this show that we're talking about, or that I'm talking about right now, which was the real world, the mental hospital, and now this asylum. And this can go either 2 ways. This was what I was talking about, which I wouldn't mind if they did go in the direction of making everything in Mark's head. These exact scenes in this asylum office would be the right way, in my opinion, like the right direction to go towards, if they were making it all in his head. Because these scenes were good, and it kind of made sense. Like, this seemed like the right way to go if they were making it in Mark's head. But I don't think they're going to go that way. So the other thing that I thought of, and I've seen other things about the same kind of thought process, was that it was just the different personalities in Mark's head, and just Mark's head, being chaotic and going haywire all the time, having to deal with this in the most grounded way possible. There's no escape from this, and he can't get away from it. No matter what he tries, no matter what he does, he can't. He can't escape it. So basically, when Mark is talking to Harrow, or Dr. Harrow in this case, this is just his mind trying to make sense of it all. Like they mentioned, he doesn't know what makes sense and what is nonsense. We can call back to the beginning of the show where Steven said he doesn't know the difference between his life and dreams, which could still be the case for Mark, because he's questioning his sanity all the time. He's aware that he's insane and can't help himself. Nothing he does, he can't escape this. So he has to deal with it, and he's trying to make sense of it all in the most logical way that he can. And with that, we have 3 different planes of existence that's involved in this show. And we really don't know. We're just watching it and observing, and we can assume and we can connect the dots and make things make sense in our own way. But until it's finished, I don't think we will know the full reality of it all and how truly real the real world is. It could be the asylum office, like I said. They could go in that direction, and Mark is just been this insane asylum patient this entire time. Or that is just his head, and it is just his boggled up mind trying to cram it together and make sense of it somehow. Since there is no escape from it, and he has to deal with it no matter what he does or how he deals with it. Or he could be an actual superhero, Moon Knight, like the real world is intending to be so far in this. A lot of questions. Hopefully they all get answered in next week's episode, which is sadly the finale, because I just want more and more of this. I'm loving this so far. I'm really interested in it. Alright, well, now that I shed light on things I wanted to, like the afterlife and the hippo moto Tawaret person, god lady, the mental asylum, the office, and everything that's going on, at least on the grand scale. Well, maybe not a grand scale, but the setting scale, and where all this is taking place, and trying to make sense of what we're actually watching. But let's focus on a smaller, more physical scale, the balance scale, and the whole purpose of this episode, and what is actually going on in this. Alright, well, firstly, let's try to connect the dots a little bit, and just let me assume and try to connect my own dots, and put these pieces together, and what I think is actually going on. Because again, there's no confirmed source or anything. It's just we have the show and the viewer's perspective of it. So I'm going to say my perspective, and I think I'm going to make sense of it and try to talk on what actually goes on in this episode. Alright, here we go. So episode 4, Harrow shoots Mark. Or in this case, Steven, since Steven is the one in control of the body. At this point, since Khonshu is no longer around and can't help Mark anymore, Mark is basically dead. And we have the entire episode of Mark with Steven, after he finds him, going through his head and memories in the afterlife to try to make sense of it all and try to balance himself out for him to be able to come back and stop Harrow. We all know Mark is not the best person, and he has many, many issues. Stuff not only in his mind and himself, but also things that have happened. The hippopotamus that they met, Tawaret, the god of fertilization and children, I think it was, has a balance scale. And this scale is the only way that they can come back, if they balance it out and really make just of it all. But things have happened in Mark's life that he needs to reflect back on and needs to revisit in his memories to actually make it come to fruition. The hippo god, Tawaret, knows that Mark's trying to come back for good reason and trying to stop unjustifiable things from happening if he stays dead. So she gives him another shot. And now this is where he needs to reflect on his memories and past experiences and everything that's happened in his life to actually balance himself out and prove himself worthy of actually coming back to life. So now that we have that out of the way, there's a lot of things that happen and a lot of things that they go back on and look through for an attempt to try to balance the scale out for them to be able to come back. And like I'd already mentioned, it's not only in this afterlife world that we're in. We come to Mark's consciousness where he's trying to make sense of it all and trying to judge himself, and he thinks he's this insane person that doesn't deserve what he has in this asylum world. But we're not going to talk about that already, because I already talked like I shed some light on that already about that Asylum. Actually, there's one thing I want to point out about the Asylum world, and that is the scene where Mark tries to attack Harrow with a broken piece of glass. If it was glass, because my memory might not be serving me well. But he tries to attack him, and that might have been Jake. That might have been Mark's third personality, like, peeking out, and his third identity. Because he acts very different and much more hostile, and much more, like, barbaric towards Harrow in that, compared to when he was just talking to him. So it could have been Jake, but, we're not fully sure on it. There's no confirmation and whatnot. Hopefully in the next episode, we'll see more of Jake and actually come to light, and maybe we can confirm that it was Jake. Or maybe in any episode that he was in that we didn't realize until now. Or until the 5th episode's out. Or 6th episode. But that could have been Jake. But anyways, let's focus on the ship and the wallwood hallways that we visit of them going through their memories while they're on the way to the field of reeds, I think it was. Which was a way of... Or not a way. It was a place, a realm of the afterlife that Tawaret shares knowledge of, that the field of reeds is the afterlife, or a form of the afterlife in Egyptian mythology. So Moon Knight does not fail on delivering more and more of Egyptian mythology, because we dive even deeper into this with this episode. So the entire episode is that Mark and Steven are facing their own judgment, or judgment of their own lives, while their hearts are on the scales. And the verdict decides whether their souls will pass, or if they're worthy of even going to the field of reeds, or they will just sit in the desert, or in that deserted land, where, sadly, you know what happens in the sands in this episode, towards the end of it, but we're not going to mention that yet. But they can either stay in there and just stay for eternity, or they'll be able to actually pass on to, the more high up, heavenly kind of place. But in this case, it's also if they're worthy of even coming back. They have to judge themselves, and they have to face judgment themselves to even find out what's going to happen to them and where they're going to end up. So that's when they go through all these memories and whatnot and try to, balance themselves out, or balance the scale out, and come to accept what's happened and come to find themselves worthy of passing on and finding out again where they're ending up. So we get a cruel and painful look at Mark's life through its entirety. Through a lot of memories and a lot of info that we receive in this episode, we learn a lot about him. And we still, to this day, to this episode, if the people don't know about the character in the show, they still learn more about him as we go on. Like I mentioned in previous videos, say someone doesn't know about this character, and this is their first sight of the character, without any flashbacks, without any origins, we still learn about the origin itself as we go on in the show. And we still learn about the character and his mythos more and more. And in Moon Knight mythos and just the character overall, a core element of this character is his DID, or dissociative identity disorder, which, of course, we learn about across all these episodes so far. But this takes a turn on it, because we get a lot of stuff of maybe new. Like I said, it might have been Jake Lockley in some scenes, and some old stuff with the origins of this in the show. We learn why his DID is a thing in the first place, other than maybe his mercenary experience, giving him trauma and giving him this disorder and making him quite insane. But we learn where it came from, at least. Even though we do see a lot of past stuff with Mark and what happened in his life and certain events go down, it's all cruel and it's all painful. It's a dark road we go down in Mark's memories and just in his mind in general. We visit past events from his life and everything that happens, and it's all just a full episode of just darkness. We visit every corner of his mind in this episode, but not every corner. Like I said, there's some things that we still have yet to see with the character and his DID, cough cough Jake, cough cough. But speaking of the DID, it birthed from trauma, and that trauma was from his childhood. Much like possibly others can relate to, trauma does birth from childhood and growing up. Maybe not in this specific scenario everyone can relate to, but some things do happen when you're younger, and it sticks with you and stays with you forever. And in this case, that's where Mark's DID did come up in the first place. Obviously, a lot of stuff came from this, but we learned in this episode that the alters and the personalities was maybe not a disorder in the first place, but as he went on, obviously he went a little crazy and a little insane as he went on, and it was turned into an identity disorder. But when he was younger, he would pretend to be someone else. He actually created this alter after watching a movie of an old adventure and took up the name of Stephen Grant, which we learn is now one of his identities, which is a very sad sight for Stephen to see, and it's very like painful to watch him discover this as the episode goes on. But we learn that Mark did create Stephen Grant to not fear anything. He created this personality and pretended to be someone else in order to get away from this trauma and everything that was going on in his life as he was a kid. So a lot of the stuff, mostly everything, not everything, but a lot of the stuff in this episode that we look back at is from Mark's childhood and him creating this alter and what actually happened in his life. So it's a lot of the relationship between Mark and his identity of Stephen. Since we don't really get a good look at Jake yet, or his third personality, we know Stephen and we know Mark. So we get a good relationship between them and what happened with them and why it was a thing in the first place. And I knew, or not knew, but I had a feeling that this would come up about how Stephen would find out and discover that he himself was not the real person and Mark was not the personality. And he was going to discover that he was actually the alter. And I knew it was coming up. I had a feeling. And now here it is. It was beautifully done, I think. And, oh, man, it's sad, though. But, yeah, we get to see the idea get created, or his alters that Mark conjures up after what happened in his childhood. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting to see. And I think they made it well. They made it pretty well. And they made it work. And also, while we're looking back at his memories in the episode, I want to mention again, if there is any appearances of Jake Lockley, it was also in the scene with his mom's death, and he was reacting to it, crying and drinking by the car outside after he found out his mother died. I think that might be Jake Lockley. It might have been Mark, but again, that's another thing that might be Jake Lockley, and I just wanted to mention in case I am right and it actually was Jake. We learn later on. I don't know, maybe I'm just assuming things, but that also did kind of look like it could have been a different personality. We're in Steven's shoes for a lot of it, even though we see Mark and Steven both in the same room almost at all times. Steven goes around Mark's mind, learning things about him and his past, as the viewers watching it too. We're learning with Steven, with what actually happened, which is really cool. It's really interesting, and I like that they do that. They've done it a lot in the show, actually, because, Moon Knight has his first appearance. This is his first appearance in the MCU, and it has to show off the character, and we have to learn the character in the first place to actually, get a grasp on him. So I think they do it pretty well in the show, especially in this episode with Steven, going around and about with Mark's memories, trying to find out what is going on. Of course, we all know, or at least I had a feeling, at least those who know the character had a feeling that he was going to find out he was the alter, and like I said, it happened and we've seen it. I'm really trying not to repeat myself too much about everything, but I'm trying to make sense of it all myself while trying to explain everything, so it's hard to not repeat myself, so sorry about that. But let's move on to the next thing, the ending. Not the very end yet, but the majority, the events before the ending of the episode, with Steven and them actually balancing the scale, or at least in this case, Mark balancing the scale. Because, well, if you've seen the episode, there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to go in or through or around this. Steven is gone. We all saw Steven did what he was made for. His purpose was to not fear anything, and he did exactly that. He helped Mark, and it got himself killed. Or, I'm not even sure what the term is, since they're in the afterlife already, on their way to the next place. So, I'm not sure where this lies. But, regardless, Steve was killed, I guess, in some way, shape, or form. He was banished to eternity. He was frozen. You all know what I'm talking about, so I don't need to go too in detail to it with it. But He was there and abandoned. He was left in damnation in the sands. And this, not only this moment, but this whole episode was like probably one of the saddest things, in my opinion, to come out of the MCU. And it's just dark, and it just like deep. There's a lot of shit that goes on in it, and a lot of things with meaning. And this was not short of that. And now moving forwards, I'm not completely sure what's going to happen, because not only is the identities themselves, but Stephen Grant himself is a big part of Moon Knight. That's what makes the character who he is. His identity disorder is a big part of the character. Always has been and always will be. So I'm not sure how they're going to play that and play their cards with this, because if Stephen Grant is dead, we don't know what's going to happen with Mark and his personalities and like moving forwards. Especially with Mr. Knight. That was his version of the suit, and now we don't know what's going to happen with it. I doubt he'll stay gone forever. I'm not sure how they're going to bring him back. Again, this was in the afterlife. And this is in Mark's head. This is not some real person. It is Mark's mental illness. It is just another like identity that he has in himself. We just seen it in the afterlife, him as his own being, like his own embodiment, because it's the afterlife. And it's a different version of Mark. It's an alter. That's what it is. It's a different identity. It's a different version of Mark that even Mark made up, and we've seen that in this episode. I doubt Mark will let Stephen go after this, because since Stephen did die, this is what made Mark be justifiable. This is what made Mark balanced on the scale. I'm not sure if it's because Stephen died and his identity, like his other identity, died, or not. Because I don't think it's that in that case. Because it's an alter, like I said. It's not another being. It's not another person. It's Mark's head. It's his own illness. It's just another identity. It's another alter. So I don't think this could mean it's gone. I do think that this could mean that Mark has come to terms and he's accepted his mental illness. He's accepted everything that's happened to him, and he's accepted Stephen and his other identities. Like I said already, this is an identity disorder. It's an alter. It's Mark Spector's alter. He cannot just get rid of it. It cannot, unless he just did, like, turn back to when he was a kid, when he made the personality and identity of Stephen Grant. Maybe then he can get rid of it, but now it's turned to a disorder. It's turned to a mental illness. He can't get rid of it. We talked about this already. And this means that him balancing it out and balancing himself out can only mean that he's come to accept his other this disorder that he has. It's not like he can get rid of it. And Stephen Grant, again, is a big part of the character, so I think he'll come back in some way, shape, or form. He will definitely make a return. Plus, of course, I'm not going to avoid saying it or anything, but this made for a hella impactful scene, and it was great. Sad, messed up, but it was still a good scene. Also, before I end this video, I wanted to say that, call back to what I said before about how we learn more about the origin of this character without actually giving us a full-on flashback scene or anything like that, or telling his origin. We even see Mark accept Khonshu's rules, and Mark dying at the feet of Khonshu's statue, and he has to accept Khonshu's fate and what Khonshu has in store for him in order to live on. I thought they were going to do this. I didn't know when, but I was waiting for it, and it showed up, and I was very happy to see it. But back to the end of the episode, we see after Stephen's demise, we see Mark go onwards, and we see the field of reeds, and Mark standing in the middle and dead center of that field. So, he's dead, and he's moved on, and he's gone beyond the underworld, beyond the afterlife, to this next place of eternal, paradise kind of thing. So, I'm not sure what's next. Probably Mark will be accepted back into the real world, and he can fulfill his duty as Moon Knight, or maybe something else. There literally could be anything as this finale. It's sad to say that's the finale, because I really love this show so far, and I want to keep it going. But obviously I'm not the one in control, and neither are any of us. But I'm sure they have a good finale planned out, hopefully. Because these Disney Plus shows are a little controversial when it comes to endings. But I'm hoping Moon Knight ends up with a bang. But I think I touched on everything. I'm so sorry if I repeated myself a lot. I was trying to explain things that, like, making it make sense to myself as well as trying to explain for the video. So I apologize if I repeated myself a lot. But I talked on pretty much everything I wanted to bring up, I'm pretty sure, and try to explain it. But I loved the episode, if you couldn't tell. I've been talking for a good minute now. And speaking of talking for a good minute, I also apologize for making this video a little too long for my liking. It wasn't on purpose or anything, but regardless, I appreciate you clicking on the video, and I appreciate you watching and hearing me out for the entirety of this. I really appreciate it greatly. And this was Moon Knight Episode 5. The next one is the 6th and final one as a finale. Let's hope it goes out with a bang. Episode 5 was powerful, it was poetic, and it was beautiful, and it was greatly done. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and come back next time. This has been Ghosty. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, comment, like, etc., etc. And I bid you all farewell.